This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your top stories. On a visit to Turkey, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says his country will unblock Ukrainian grain from Black Sea ports on the condition that Ukraine first demines its waters. A man drives a car through a crowd in Berlin, killing one person and injuring around 30 others. German authorities say they are investigating whether it was a deliberate attack.
Here in The Cube, we look at the latest false claims online, including misinformation that Ukrainian refugees set fire to a house in Germany.
And Belgium's king visits DRC as calls grow for financial reparations to be paid for a brutal colonial rule. I'm Helena Humphrey. It is good to have you with us. Hopes tonight that the world could avoid a global food crisis remain on ice. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was in Ankara earlier, meeting with his Turkish counterpart to discuss the very issue of how to get much-needed Ukrainian food exports out of ports, which are currently being blockaded by Russian forces. And while Lavrov agreed in principle to granting safe passage to shipments of grain, both Turkey and Russia said that there were strings attached, as Neil O'Reilly now reports.
A step forward in heading off a looming global food crisis. The Russian and Turkish foreign ministers say progress has been made in talks aimed at securing grain exports from Ukraine's war-ravaged ports. At the UN's request, Turkey is offering to escort convoys of vital food supplies, despite the presence of mines. Sergei Lavrov said Russia is willing to play its part.
We are ready to ensure the safety of ships that leave Ukrainian ports and go to the straits. We are ready to do this in cooperation with our Turkish colleagues.
But Russia's cooperation may come with conditions. Moscow wants punitive economic sanctions lifted and has had a sympathetic hearing from Turkey.
If we need to open up the international markets to Ukrainian grain, sunflower or sunflower oil, we see the removal of obstacles standing in the way of Russia's exports as a legitimate demand.
Final agreement may be some way off, but it can't come soon enough. Ukraine's grain exports are an essential food source for many countries, and some populations are already suffering their absence. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
Well, tracking those talks for us very closely is our correspondent Galina Polinskaya. We can cross over to her now. Good evening. Good to see you, Galina. Following that meeting, we heard from Sergei Lavrov, and he said that there was some willingness, but all of this would come with conditions in terms of demining the waters, also in terms of the West lifting sanctions, which are currently on Moscow right now. Kyiv has said that demining is a non-starter because essentially it would leave its waters wide open to attack. So can we expect any progress here?
Hello, Helena. Well, at this point, I could not say that we can expect any progress, but let's see, there could be another round of talks in Istanbul. But right now, Russia seems to sending the ball to the Ukrainian camp. Sergei Lavrov said that the responsibility to solve the grains problem lays on Ukraine, that Ukraine has to demine the ports of the Black Sea, and that Russia needed to take no action because it has already made all the commitments. He said that Russia states daily that it guarantees the safety of vessels leaving Ukrainian ports, but Ukraine says that Russians' proposals are unrealistic, that it needs effective security guarantees, and it voices concerns that Moscow could use the potential corridor to move on Odessa. And the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov today said that Ukrainian grains are overestimated, that even if they are on the world market, it would not solve the problem of the food crisis. And Russia keeps on blaming these sanctions, their direct or indirect effect, like no insurance for the ships coming from Russia. So at this point, there is no solution, but Russia said that it was ready to meet in Istanbul with representatives from Ukraine, Turkey and the UN, and let's see what it brings to us. But at this point, just in some weeks, Ukraine will have no more storage for its new harvest.
Well, that's a very important point to make, Galina. Meanwhile, we're also hearing today that according to Russian state media that around 1,000 Ukrainian fighters who were in Mariupol have now been transferred to Russia. We've also seen 2 British fighters who say that they were fighting shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians go on trial today in Russia. What more can you tell us about their fates?
Well, a video of Aidan Ashland and Sean Pena have been circulating in the pro-Russian social media. A video of them in the defendant's cage. They were indeed on trial, and they are located in the separatist region, pro-Russian separatist region, the so-called Donetsk People's Republics. The court is taking place there, so it's not an internationally recognized court. And they were both captured after defending Mariupol's Azovstal steel plant and are accused of fighting as mercenaries. And there are actually several charges: committing a crime as a part of a criminal group, forcible seizure of power, and the promotion of training in terrorist activities. Separatist leader Denis Pushilin said that he did not rule out a death sentence for both of them, but we know that they've both been living in Ukraine since 2018, and their families released a statement that says that they were members of the Ukrainian military and not volunteers of mercenaries, so they should be treated as prisoners of war. And Russian state media has just released information that Sean Pena pleaded guilty, Helena.
All right, Galina Polonskaya bringing us that important update. Galina, good to talk to you. Thank you. Well, Ukraine's aspirations of joining the European Union were once again in focus today with the visit from the chairman of Ukraine's parliament. Now, Ruslan Stefanchuk was in Strasbourg earlier and he pleaded with European officials for his country to join the bloc. We can cross over now to our correspondent in Brussels, Maeve McMahon, for more on his address. Good to see you, Maeve. The Speaker of the Ukrainian parliament bringing his message essentially to the heart of Europe. He spoke to Euronews. What did he have to say?
Absolutely. Ruslan Stefanchuk speaking in the European Parliament this morning, and not for the first time. The Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament spoke already to the Parliament virtually back on the 1st of March, and he said back then he had a frog in his throat. He was full of emotion, but today he stood in front of the parliamentarians physically feeling supported and feeling like he was speaking to friends. He pointed out the fact that so far 14 million Ukrainians have been displaced, 8 million internally and 6 million outside Ukraine, and he thanked personally the support that he'd received from the European Union, not from politicians but from people across the continent who've opened their homes to support people in need from Ukraine. But beyond that message of thanks, what Ruslan Stefanchuk really asked for this morning in front of those European parliamentarians in Strasbourg was membership for Ukraine. Candidacy, something that will of course be discussed on the 24th of June at an EU summit, and that was the point of an interview as well with Euronews' Shandor Ziros. Take a listen now to Ruslan Stefanchuk.
We don't want for you to invent something new, non-existent status for Ukraine, or do something special for Ukraine. Ukraine wants a frank way to get this status, and then later on we want to do everything which is needed to receive full-fledged membership. But if we're going to get the candidacy, we can have our roadmap and we can better understand what we have to do, when we have to do it, which is better.
A very frank Ruslan Stefanchuk there from the Ukrainian Parliament. He'll be visiting a number of European countries now, speaking to various parliaments, drumming up support for that candidacy, which he said today in that speech would be a watershed moment and a very strong message for Putin and also the people of Ukraine, who he said have been fighting for months in the name of the values of the European Union.
All right there, Maeve McMahon bringing us that message. Thank you so much, Maeve. At least one person has died and several others were injured when a car drove into pedestrians this morning in a Berlin shopping district. Local authorities say that a car ploughed into a crowd of people near the Kurfürstendamm in the west of the capital. Now, the car then crashed into a shop window just streets away from the scene of the Berlin Christmas market truck attack. That was in 2016. 6 of the victims have sustained life-threatening injuries, and police say they've arrested the driver, but investigations are ongoing into whether he acted deliberately. Well, for the very latest on this evolving situation, we're joined live from Berlin by our reporter, Jona Kalgren. Jona, good to see you. We are hearing now from a number of German news outlets that a letter was found inside of this vehicle. What more can you tell us?
Well, I just spoke to a police spokesperson here just now before we went on air, and she said that the car that the person used, this 29-year-old person used for this attack or incident, whatever you want to call it at this stage, was not his car. It was the car of his sister. And they are just at the moment working through to see what actually belonged to him in this car and what actually belonged to the sister. So she did not want to confirm that there is a letter from the main suspect in the car. However, as you say, a lot of German media is reporting that such a letter exists. However, no one has reported so far what then would be in this letter. That is still very unclear if such a letter does exist, which the police didn't want to confirm.
What more do we know about the suspect at this stage?
Well, he's a 29-year-old dual citizen, German-Armenian citizen. He's been living in Berlin for a very long time. Some media has reported that he was known to the police. That, however, was also something that the police spokesperson here didn't want to comment on and didn't want to confirm. What is clear, though, is when you look at this situation here, he drove into what reportedly was a school class right here. And just behind me is the place where the teacher of this school class died. She was the victim, the one victim. He then drove several hundred meters in that direction before crashing into this shop. This does not seem, at least on the face of it, like someone who is trying to avoid hurting people or had some sort of accident. It seems like this 29-year-old really was either, for whatever reason it might be, out to hurt and injure people. And the latest on the injuries, 6 people are now injured with life-threatening injuries. And, of course, tragically, that one person has died.
Very tragic news indeed there from Berlin. Jona Kalgren, thanks so much. False claims have emerged online that Ukrainian refugees have set fire to a house in Germany after attempting to burn a Russian flag. Well, Matthew and our team in the Cube have been fact-checking those reports for you.
Well, Helena, we've seen continual attempts to discredit narratives about the war in Ukraine and the impact it has on the West. The United Nations says that nearly half of the 6.6 million people that have fled the country have now moved from border countries to other nations like Germany and Italy. And misinformation about the refugees has followed them there. Now, this misleading video has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times on social media. It falsely claims that the German tabloid newspaper Bild has reported on a house fire that was allegedly started by Ukrainian refugees when they were trying to burn a Russian flag. In this footage, you can see not only the fire and the Bild logo, but also a woman crying. And this footage was shared not just on Russian and Chinese social media platforms, it also appeared on Twitter, spread by German users. But the video is fake. The deputy editor-in-chief of Bild has stated firmly on social media that this is not one of their genuine reports. And what's more, the footage doesn't even show a recent incident. You can use open source tools on the internet to reverse search for that video and try and find when it first appeared on the internet. And by doing that, you will come across this video on YouTube of that same exact property burning, which, as you can see, was filmed many years before the Ukraine war even began in July 2013. And what's more, that footage of the woman crying, that also appeared many months before millions of Ukrainian refugees fled the country. That video on YouTube published first in January 2021. So, Helena, neither of those clips that were being shared on social media have anything to do with Ukrainian refugees. This is once again an example of online misinformation being spread during times of conflict.
All right, Matthew and team, thanks a lot. Now, on his first visit to the Democratic Republic of the Congo as monarch, Belgium's King Philippe has returned a looted artefact to the Central African country. Now, King Philippe and Queen Mathilde arrived in the former Belgian colony at the invitation of the president of DRC, Félix Tshisekedi, for a 6-day tour. Now, it is the latest in a series of attempts by the Belgian monarch to atone for the abuses committed under a brutal regime by the former colonial power, in which an estimated 12 million Congolese were killed. Now, in 2020, on the 60th anniversary of DRC's independence, the king expressed his deepest regrets for the actions of his ancestors. Well, the trial of former FIFA President Sepp Blatter and former UEFA chief Michel Platini, scheduled to begin on Wednesday, has been delayed by a day. Blatter, who is 86, told a court hearing in Switzerland he couldn't testify at the trial because of chest pains. Now, the pair are facing fraud charges relating to a 2011 payment from Blatter to the former France captain in the region of 1.9 million euros. At least 21 people have died and another 87 were injured after a train derailed in eastern Iran. The cause of the accident is still unclear, but authorities are investigating whether the train struck a piece of machinery which was parked close to the tracks. At least 22 people have died after a speeding bus veered off a mountain road in southwestern Pakistan, leaving no survivors. Authorities are in the process of delivering the bodies to their relatives after they were transported to a nearby hospital. Officials are looking into the cause of the crash and have noted mechanical problems or human error as possible causes. Harrowing and profoundly moving. Those are some of the reviews of film critics describing this year's winner of the European Parliament's Lux Film Award. Now, Bosnia's Quo Vadis Ada tells the horrifying story of death and destruction at the height of the Balkan War in 1995. But the film's director says that mistakes made back then are still being repeated today, as Christopher Pitchers reports.
The Lux Prize Audience Award for 2022, and the winner is Quo Vadis Ida Jasmila Zvanic.
Another great honour for the 47-year-old Bosnian director who keeps collecting awards for what critics are calling a searing account of war's devastating human toll. The prize winner was accompanied by a Srebrenica survivor at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. The film dramatises the events of the Srebrenica massacre, during which Serbian troops sent Bosniak men and boys to death in July 1995.
As I said,
named for its protagonist, Quo Vadis Ida shows events through the eyes of a mother named Ida, a schoolteacher who works with the United Nations as a translator. And Zabanic says she sees parallels to today's war in Ukraine.
Of victims in Prijedor. For me, it's really sad that we as Europeans didn't learn anything from Balkan wars. We didn't learn how to talk before war happened. Now it's madness of war. But there were signs that war is prepared, and we didn't look at these signs, and we didn't find a way not to have war in Europe. For me, this is really, really sad. It makes me very sad that people are dying when we are talking about it.
The ending of Quo Vadis Ida is deliberately ambiguous. It makes clear that many perpetrators escaped with impunity. The film has been universally acclaimed by critics and received multiple awards. It was also nominated for the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival in 2020 and the Academy Awards 1 year later. Christopher Pitchers, Euronews, Brussels.
In the days before COVID, students from the European Union regularly took school trips to the UK to study English. Well, travel restrictions might have now eased, but there is a new spanner in the works preventing them from brushing up on their vocab, and that is Brexit. Louise Miner now has the story.
Hello. In this class in Colmar in northeast France, they're preparing to leave for the United Kingdom, more precisely for Edinburgh. The English teacher has the precious passports that are essential for entering the UK. It's passports and no longer the European identity card, which is now not accepted by the UK since Brexit.
I would like you to recap what we did last time. Can you just recap?
This new regulation has greatly complicated the task of organising school trips to Britain.
And at his death,
It was a real challenge. We spent a few nights wondering if we should cancel everything. But we decided to power through in the end, and we did.
The main challenge was for families to obtain passports in time, as this father explained, just as the school bus leaves for the trip.
I got in touch with Colmar Town Hall to make an appointment so that we could have a passport made for my daughter, Alice. But the earliest appointments were at the end of June, so I contacted other nearby towns. But all the available appointments were at a much later date. The only appointment that was a few days away was in the town of Ferret, which is almost an hour's drive from our home.
In addition to the delays, it costs up to €40 for teenagers to obtain a passport. Non-European pupils living on European soil have to pay €120 to get a visa, to be able to go with their fellow classmates. For pupils, these trips abroad represent a breath of fresh air after 2 years of the pandemic, which has deprived them of school trips and being with their friends. But the new administration constraints linked to Brexit have produced a considerable reduction in school trips to the UK. And now many schools are preferring to opt for other English-speaking destinations, such as Ireland instead.
You're up to date. I'll see you soon.